All right, welcome back to another episode of Millennial Sales. This is your host, Tommy Tahoe Alemo, and I'm here to bring you another week full of content specifically for millennials trying to up their sales and business career. So got a great episode. Before we get into what we're talking about today, just want to let you know that you can find more content from me. I post daily on LinkedIn, Tom Alemo, on Twitter and Instagram at Tommy Tahoe. And you can find show notes, blogs, newsletters, everything else on millennialmomentum.net. And you can check out this podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever that you typically listen to your podcast. You can check out Millennial Sales and do a little research there. So I would be very grateful if you subscribed, if you left a review, if you found any value. That just helps us to reach more people and help spread the message. So without further ado, in this week's episode, I do an interview with Jake Dunlap. So Jake is the CEO of Skaled Consulting. Most of you probably have seen him on LinkedIn or elsewhere. He's one of the best voices in the modern world of B2B sales. And there's a few reasons why I love Jake. And one is that he's a true practitioner. He's been there. He's done it. He's gone from, selling in the Major League Baseball for the Tampa Bay Rays to the NHL, where he was selling for the Phoenix Coyotes, getting into technology and HR, where he ultimately landed at Glassdoor and helped to scale their team up and ran all of sales there in the early 2010s. And we talk about a lot of different things. We talk about his early career. We talk about why he told his boss to fuck off while he was at the Phoenix Coyotes and what that was all about. What I really appreciate and where we really see eye to eye and talk a lot about is picking growth over money earlier in your career. And that's his advice, and how to become a student of the game, right? Always working on your growth, on your skill set. And that's what ends up leading to, big dollars and a lot of success later on in your career. We talk about some great stories from his early days in sales, from Glassdoor, from when he was selling in some of the sports world. So it's a great episode. Jake is all over the place. You can check him out on LinkedIn. He's posting every single day, probably multiple times. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can check out Skaled, Skaled Consulting. He's all over the place. He's really kind of like a Gary V for the B2B sales world. So you can check him out all over. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So without further ado, let me bring you to my conversation with Jake Dunlap. Let's go. All right, Jake Dunlap. Good morning, man. Welcome to Millennial Sales.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. And so I saw, just to get into it, I saw a post from you, I think earlier this week or a few days ago, just about the COVID slump, and that's obviously timely. So how's COVID treated you the last 6 or 7 months? How are you dealing with everything?
Yeah, I think I call it like the quarantine zombie mode.
Yeah.
It's been good, man. Honestly, it's been, as when you're running a company, I think what we've done is found a good job to, what do you call it? I think we've done a good job of trying to like keep up with everybody, but also you've got a little bit of extra freedom. You get a little bit less of like, hey, Jake, do you have a second? Jake, do you have a second? Yeah. So it's been good. We bought a house literally like a week and a half before the world went into lockdown. So we've been enjoying that. And so playing a lot more golf. So it's actually been kind of good. I've actually taken the time to kind of find a little mental separation. So it's been good.
Yeah. I mean, that was the same with me. I moved like a few weeks before the shutdown, just coincidentally moved in with my girlfriend. So it was like, man, we picked a hell of a time to make that
You went all in, man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's great to have you on the show. And, one thing I really wanted to start off with was to talk about the early days of your career.
Sure, man.
You came in, first job, looked like you were selling for the Rays, doing some season ticket sales and things like that. And to me, as a sports fan, that seems like the dream, or at least in college it did. I'm from Boston, so it was like, I knew people that would sell for the Red Sox or the Celtics or whatever it might be. So I'd love to just hear about that experience, maybe the good, the bad, because it sounds like it's a little bit of a grind and maybe not like
Yeah.
you get to shake hands with all the players all the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's exactly what it is. No, it's not,
Yeah,
just so you guys know. Look, I mean, I was probably a lot like you, right? I was like, man, that would be so great. I'd go work in sports and I love sports. And, I was really fortunate to get that job. I had an internship in college with a minor league football team in Springfield. And, really, I'll tell you, I think a big reason I got the job, and I've talked about this before, but I think it's an important one is, I had a professor and I feel like I was very lucky. He said, what you've got to do is bring a business plan to the interview process. I was like, okay, well, what is that? And so he kind of just explained it to me about just bring a plan. And so, I brought to that interview, it's funny. So I found the one that I did for the Coyotes and I found the one that I did for Career Builder. I can't find the Tampa one. I know it exists somewhere. But I basically brought like, hey, here's what I know about the Tampa market. Here's how I think I'm going to position the Rays to actually be successful and to sell stuff. And so I think that really set me apart from the interview, process. My GPA wasn't super amazing. The thing is, again, the other thing that set me apart is, look, when I was in college, I worked. I did telemarketing. I waited tables. So I had already had some at-bats and experience. So by the time I was working 30 hours a week in college. So for me, by the time I graduated, I already had probably a year or 2 full years of work experience on all these people. And so it allowed me to really accelerate my career very quickly because I was already so far ahead of them. And so I think, you got to be prepared when those opportunities come. You can't just show up and wing it. And I think, those factors, getting the experience, being prepared, really helped to set me apart early in my career for sure.
And how important is it to get some of that early experience, like in college and in high school? I was teaching tennis camps. I sold Cutco knives in college. That was kind of my foray into sales. But how important do you think that is for people that are in college to get some level of, telemarketing or whatever it might be to kind of give them a foray into what sales might really be like?
Yeah, look, if you're in college, I mean, 100%, you don't know what you want to do. And I think too often, and I wasn't, let's be very real here, right? Like I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go into sales right after college. It was more of like, I knew I wanted to work in sports. I'd already had sales experience. I knew that I was good at it then. And then I think I really kind of came into my own in my first 2 years, 2 to 3 years out of school. But I think for a lot of people, why not dabble? Why not go get a part-time job? Why not go do some of that in advance versus just focusing on the checkbox for your mom and dad, which is what 99% of people are going to college for. They're not going to college to learn shit. They're going to college to party and to, do the checkbox for mom and dad and then figure it out later. And so I think, and that's how whenever we bring in interns, it's a job. We don't treat them like interns. Like you have responsibilities, you have deadlines, and you're supposed to meet those. And, they really learn a skill. So I feel like, you've got to make that at least a goal. Even if your major doesn't require it, I would always be focused on like, at least getting a glimpse of what the real world's going to be like.
Yeah. And because of that experience, did you feel like you latched onto that first job pretty quickly? Like you started to have some success or what was that like?
Yeah, exactly. Cause I'd already done, when you've got to try to, you did Cutco, so you get it. Like when you've got to try to get someone's credit card over the phone, you've got to be able to make a connection, build rapport very, very quick. And, Tampa at the time was literally the worst team. And now they're the number one team in the American League right now. But at the time they were literally the worst team in the worst stadium. And, so you had to learn like, look, so what are you really selling? Like, I'm not selling tickets. I'm selling time with your kids. I'm selling making your current customers happy. I'm selling new customer acquisition. I'm not selling tickets to baseball games. And I think I had inherently learned that skill already. Whereas other people were talking about, oh, we're going to be better this year. And I didn't talk about the team. I would talk about the experience and making sure people, we talked about what that would be like. And so I think that skill in particular is what helped to leapfrog me very early over people in their first, even people that already had 3 or 4 years of experience. I think why I moved past them faster was that I always knew that it was about selling the outcome, the benefit versus what it tactically is. And so that's my advice for a lot of young sellers is always just think about what does this mean to that other person? What's the outcome that other person, why are they purchasing? Why are they trying to do this thing? and you've got to sell that thing. You can't just sell the dream of, we're going to be better this season or whatever it is. So.
And that probably even helps you to get more interested in the job. Like, let's say you're selling a technology that you're not passionate about, or a widget or whatever. But when you think about it as, hey, I'm helping Jake do his job better, make more money, run his business easier, whatever it might be, that then makes, at least from my perspective, makes you feel more fulfilled as a salesperson.
Absolutely.
Right? 'Cause then it's less about like, doing the thing and making the call and trying to sell. And it's like, no, if I believe in the product and I believe it actually helps the customer, which, that's the first point, then you should feel comfortable and confident and more fulfilled with what you're doing.
That's right. And that's it. If you don't believe in what you're selling, or you can't get behind it, I just don't think you can be successful. If you don't really believe in the outcome that you can produce for somebody, you can't be successful, because your heart's not in it. And then the prospect will hear it, they'll know that you're just going through the motions, versus this is somebody who actually believes this is going to be helpful. And that you can transfer that sense of belief, right? Like you can transfer that sense of, hey, this is going to help you. This is going to be beneficial for you. And if you don't have that belief, they hear it. They hear the mundane, they hear the not bought inness, etc. So.
Yeah. And how would you suggest folks do that? Like, do you think sitting in talking with customers is a great way to do that?
Absolutely.
Do you think it's like, don't even join the company unless you really, really get the product first? Like, how do you make sure that you do
It's
that?
interesting. Look, I'll take a step back. I think I'll answer that, but I think I'll address something different. One is you've got to care about being in sales. Like, meaning if you're not interested in being a student of the game and getting better and wanting to be better, that to me is actually the prereq. The prereq was like, do you want to be the best possible sales individual you can be, or move then into leadership, or whatever that is for you? If you don't have that hunger, it's never going to work for you. For me, I can get excited about a lot of different things because I can see a lot of different angles and utilities for it. But if I didn't have that baseline of like really being passionate about sales and really being excited and continuing to grow as a professional and having that appetite to get better, then I don't think you can be great at sales either. You can probably be serviceable. You could build like a good life and, just kind of meander along and make decent money. But I don't think you can be really, really legendary great if you don't love sales at the core. And then I think if you love sales, you can I think it's easier to find interest or passion in other, in different verticals. When I got into like the job space, right? Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm so passionate about selling, job advertisements or whatever, right. No. But when you think about the outcome, I'm helping people get jobs. I'm helping companies hit their revenue goals. I'm helping companies, succeed. Like that's something you can get behind. So I think a lot of sellers almost look at their job too tactically, and as opposed to looking for, hey, what does this thing actually do? But I think a lot of it though does start with having that desire to get better as a seller and really treat it like a profession. And I think that's where that to me is the foundation, that if you don't have that, you're going to struggle, period. And so a lot of you out there, maybe do a quick gut check and see, hey, is this, do I want to get better at this skill? And if the answer is no, then, go do accounting or something else.
Yeah. And I would say you should probably, depending on where you are in your career, it might take some time. Sales is hard for anyone, no matter how good or how passionate you are. So like my suggestion to folks is that you give it at least a year, because the first, 3, 6, 9 months, like you might not make a sale, or you might not hit your numbers as a BDR, whatever you're doing. But I feel like you should sign yourself a commitment to do it, give it a year. And if at the end of the year you stink at it and you hate it, it's all good. Go do something else. And that's what I think your 20s and maybe even your 30s or 40s, like trying to figure out what it is you want to do and that you're good at. But just because it's tough for the first month and you kind of suck at it to start with doesn't mean
absolutely, man.
Quit either. Kind of
that's exactly right. Yeah, and sell out completely, meaning like commit. Like there's a difference between like, I'm going to give it a shot for a year and like, I'm going to study, learn, grow, rip off what other people are doing, take best practices, try new things and do that for a year, versus Johnny, you know, who shows up from 9 to 5 and then goes out and just wants to get drunk with his boys. Like it's a very different mindset. So if you're going to do it, you have to choose the former. You have to pick to go all in. And for me, you know, I'll tell a story that I think will be really helpful about a kind of a point in my career. So I was really successful in sports, 2.5 years, told my boss to F off. I got fired. Don't tell your boss to F off, no matter how much, and you'll find this out. And it's kind of, I think it's hard, you know, like,
can you tell that story? I was going to ask
dude, all day. Yeah. No, I can tell. I'll tell it. So I went to, so I'll tell you, so I was in Tampa for 1.5 years. I'll tell the story actually how then I went to the Coyotes, because that was another fun one. So we got a new VP in Tampa. I cannot remember this dude's name. Anyway, long story short, and I was at the time, I was the number one salesperson in the org. It was me and this other guy. I got promoted in 1.5 years from group sales to season ticket to one of 2 senior account executives. And me and him were actually hiring and managing the first true inside sales team they'd ever had in 16 months. And so I thought I was like God's gift. I'm like, I am the man. I am so good. So we got this new VP, and I'll never forget Clark Beacom. Clark actually is here in Austin now. He's the CRO of the new Austin MLS team that start next year. And I remember Clark was probably, Clark was, 28 at the time, or so 27. I'm like, Clark, I want to go meet with him and I want to find out what he's all about. And I could just see the look of dread in Clark's eyes of just like, oh God, what's Jake going to do? Like, and sure enough, like immediately I went in and I look at this guy, he's like a 45, 50-year-old grown ass man. And I'm like, so hey, like, it's been like, a week and a half. I haven't had a chance to meet. Like, tell me what you're all about. And the guy looked at me with this just look of disgust of like, who is it? And I just see like the blood drain out of my boss's face. And I don't know, man. I thought I didn't quite understand how the world worked, especially politics. And so I ended up, I was already interviewing at the time. So I moved to Phoenix. I was there for about 10 months. And what I was doing extremely well. And I just thought, like, if you're a top salesperson, you just kind of do whatever you want. And that unfortunately is not the case. And also just, there's a lot of bosses out there that, man, they pay a lot of lip service to like, I'm like, they'll go out and get drunk with you or whatever it is. And then you think you can joke with them, but you can't. And that's really what happened. It's like, I thought I had this relationship with my boss. And so I sent an email and told him to F off about something that I thought he was giving me grief over. They pulled me in the office the next day and fired me. And I was just like, what? Like, I couldn't believe it. I was the number one seller in premium seats at the time. And I could not believe it. I remember I was like crying in my car ride home, like my life's over. And so, it was a really rude awakening for me about just like corporate culture, and just like how it was also just like how dispensable salespeople are. That there's just an idea and an attitude a lot of times, and sales leaders too. It's like, look, and especially in sports. So that's the disenfranchisement with sports. Their attitude is like, everybody wants your job. We'll just go find somebody else who's willing to work for nothing. And that's just the attitude. And so I kind of had that realization, I was like, oh man, like, is this really what I want to do? Like, I want to get treated like this, like, and, have this drama. And, look, there's only one head of sales at a sports team on the ticket side and one maybe on the sponsorship side. So every promotion, you've got to move across the country. And that's fine for me. I like, living in different spots, but it's just a very interesting space. It's just like working in entertainment. Do you get to meet the players every once in a while? Sure. I shake Wayne Gretzky's hand. Yes. Like, but that's not the day to day. The day to day, especially Major League Baseball, there's 82 home games, so you're working from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 82 days, and then it's not like, oh, come in later the next day. It's like, no, then get your ass back in at 8 a.m. So that's a little bit of the early days. That's how it all shook out.
Yeah. Do you think that's something? Do you see that a lot with other young people that are doing well? Maybe have that. I don't know if it's a resistance to authority or if it's just getting too big for your own britches early because you're seeing success. Like, is that something that you saw throughout your career, that people did that to you when you?
But again, I think I can deal with it better. Like, I think maybe because I was that person, I can deal with people who have maybe a little bit more of an ego and not feel it's my job to break them down or anything, but instead to channel it maybe more appropriately. and be like, look, and that's how it is. If one of my people told me to F off, it's just funny. I would just never respond that way. Right. Like I would be like, well, what am I doing to cause this situation? Oh crap. Maybe I'm going to Hooters and getting drunk with these guys. And now they think like they can get all familiar. Like that's on me as a leader. And so I feel like it made me more aware of as a leader. And I definitely had multiple where, people stepped out of line or maybe said something that, I think other people would have fired them for. And for me, it was like, okay, all right, this is a coachable moment here. Let's like sit down and have the conversation. And some of those people turned out to be just, top performers. And there definitely could have been a world where I could have, fired them for kind of them stepping out of line. But I think you've got to find the right leader that, you can trust. And it's tough to know though. It's really, really hard, man. Really hard.
Yeah. So how do you, this is an interesting topic because the last role I had was my first sales management gig. And, I was managing people that were my age, a year younger. Right. And there's the culture of, people kind of, it's a friendly office and a friendly team and it's a, tight knit group. And so I always felt uncomfortable a little bit being like that same age where it's like, hey, do you want to go get a beer? Do you want to, then you're talking about, and there's always that fine line between like, you want to build a relationship with people and you want to, if they want to open up to you about, personal things or, the financial goals that they have, or,
of course,
something that's going wrong with their family that's affecting them. Like you want to be there and you want to know that and you want to have those conversations, but kind of bordering that with not getting too close, right? Because then it's hard to make, an objective decision. This person gets promoted over this person, or this person needs to be let go, or whatever the situation is. So is that something that you find to be difficult too, or do you have advice on that?
Yeah, you can't have it both ways, right? You can't be invested in people and not feel for people. You know what I'm saying? So yes, I need to know. I want to know where my people are trying to go, their goals. And are there times when, you maybe delay a tough decision? Sure. Yeah, I definitely think it can have an impact. But the key is there's a difference between invested in somebody and being somebody's like best friend or buddy. And I think that's where you have to kind of know the line of, and the other thing I talk a lot about is that leadership isn't a hat that you come into work and put on. And I think that's where I see the flip side is there's leaders who come in and they're this certain way inside the office. And then you get them outside of work and they're insane, or like whatever it is, right? That's fake leadership. Leadership is something where you're fairly consistent. We're all a little bit different inside and outside of work, sure, but you're fairly consistent. Leadership's not a hat. You come in, it's 9:00, you put your leadership hat on and you walk out. Leadership is a 24/7 commitment. And so I think, look, I would always engineer toward caring about people and maybe being slightly slower to let someone go than, acting like I don't know, like tough inside of work. And then you're a completely different person outside of it. So it's a really tough thing, honestly, that still, even at, 40, I still think I'm like, okay at. So, I don't think that it's each person's so individual that it's really tough to say it's always this way or that way.
Yep. So I want to pivot a little bit to something that you talk a lot about that I think is super interesting and I agree with, and that's choosing your career path over, short-term financial gains, especially early in your career. When I came out of school, I was making, a lot less than a lot of my other friends that went into a Big Four accounting firm or, or financial analyst or whatever, coming in as, a first-time salesperson. But I learned a ton so early. And I think you've talked a lot about, maybe not taking that 5 to 10K more money and really focus on learning and growing. And it kind of speaks earlier to treating sales as a craft and a profession that you want to get better at. But for people that are maybe have that carrot dangling ahead of them of a recruiter saying, hey, you can make 10K more doing this. But they know that maybe they're just going through a tough period and need to learn and grow where they're at or a different job. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a tough topic sometimes for people, just for the simple fact that, look, everyone has their own situation, right? You might have, maybe you had a kid early, maybe you don't have the luxury of not taking the money. And in those cases, it's like, do what you got to do, And so the key thing, and sometimes people, I guess, like, I don't know, over focus on it. My point is, if you can focus on taking jobs to learn skills, and I think that's really the root of all of this, is like, it's the same thing as going to school, right? You should go to school to learn shit, not to get a degree, but to actually learn stuff and learn a skill. But how often do you just go through the motions? And so I feel like if every job, you think, before you take the job, you got to think, what am I trying to get out of this? What's the skill that I'm trying to hone? What's the thing that I want to get better at or double down on? I'm already good at it, and I want to, emphasize that. I feel like that decision-making is what separates people once they, especially, man, that it's like that late 20s, early 30s, the people that focus on skill development early, you then see like an arc in their career versus the people that kind of just go to the next job for a little bit more, the next job. And then there comes that part where like the paths cross because the arc starts to get steeper. And because they delayed that, because they focus on building skill, and then over time, they're going to make a lot more money. So I feel like not enough people are purposeful about the jobs they take. They look at the dollar amount versus the skill that they're going to build. And I feel like that is the trade-off that most people need to think about. Are you taking this job to build skill, or are you taking this job for $5,000 or $10,000 more, but you're not actually going to learn anything? Now, if you need the $10,000, totally different conversation, right? Yep. But if you don't need, not want, need the $10,000, really think about, like, am I going to learn more? The grass isn't greener in most cases. And so for me, because I really focused on that, I made a decision, a very pivotal decision that I made. I was, after I left sports, I did like a little bit of real estate for a little bit, and I could not self-manage. I mean, I was like, 25, 26. Yeah. Almost just turned 26. And dude, I was playing, I think, Godfather on Xbox 24/7. I couldn't stay focused. So I was like, I got to get a job. Like, I'm not one of those people. Like, I need a job. And so when I got back into tech at Career Builder, for me, I, moved into leadership quick, and I won't get into all the details, but, I was in leadership for 2.5 years. And then I realized, look, I kind of, again, I was the number one team 2 years in a row in percent to quota out of 25 inside teams. So I was like, okay, like I've gotten pretty good at this, right? And guess what? I was doing it for over 2 years, right? So guys, once you have a little bit of success, it doesn't mean you're like good at it. It means like you're starting to maybe possibly be good at something after 2 years, 2.5 years. But what I realized, look, for that next step that I wanted, I needed enterprise sales experience. Like we had closed my team, and like we had closed 6-figure deals before, but there was like 1 or 2. But I knew, like, to your point, talking about being a first-time manager, if I was, my mid to late 20s, and I'm going to go lead some 45-year-old grown-ass, man or woman, I got to walk the walk. I needed to go do it. So I went back into the field. I made a choice to go back into the field, back into sales, back into the grind, because I needed a skill set, right? So I went back into the field, transferred to the San Francisco office, was a major account executive, got promoted to national. I was the youngest national account executive out of like 75 people. And what that did for me is then when Glassdoor came along, I had proven leadership experience, proven enterprise sales experience. Career Builder, when I was in Phoenix, they paid for my MBA. So I went back and got my MBA. I was like, well, look, they're going to pay for it. So I worked full time, went to school full time, 10 plus hours a week. And then when the opportunity came, I was the best candidate to be the first VP of sales. And it's because of always taking opportunities to learn and grow and build skill versus, I could have stayed in Phoenix. Things would have been cush. Things were good. I had a good team. Things were good. We were cranking. Like I didn't need to leave to go back into the field. It wasn't a need. And I don't know. Did I make more money? I don't think I made more money. I would guess that probably at that point in leadership, it was probably net, maybe a step back because I didn't know like what commission I would make, or maybe as close to equal of going back and being an enterprise rep. I don't remember, but it definitely wasn't like oh, I'm getting a big pay bump here. It was kind of the opposite. It was like, I had this really cush. So I think that's my advice for a lot of people is focus on building skill, well, forever, but definitely early, because that skill compounds over time. And I'm telling you, man, I've seen those leaders. I've talked to them. I've seen them. Those people who in their mid 20s, late 20s, they just kept taking that next sales role. I got a lot of buddies from college, that are kind of in that. They got into the medical device sales and all this stuff. And yeah, that's just, it's a very path.
So how do you think about your career, or how maybe it's different now, but how did you in your late 20s, mid 20s, you're thinking about skill development? Were you thinking one role at a time? Like, hey, in order to get to where I want to be next, I need to sell enterprise. And then from there, it's like, all right, now I need to lead a team. Or did you think, hey, 10 years from now, I want to, be a CEO, or I want to be a VP of sales, and these are the things I need to do?
No, it's somewhere like in between, probably. It was more, the advice I give to people is you always think about the next step. Okay, not where I'm in now, not the next role, but what am I doing over this role and the next role to prepare me for the next role? That is the mindset you have to have, at least. And then if you have that foresight to think about 5 roles ahead, then amazing. For me, again, I am a naturally curious I like to learn. I like to improve. I like to grow. And so for me, I drove a lot of my career decisions based on growth. I drove a lot of my career decisions based on, okay, I know that, again, like, let's just go back to Career Builder. I was a inside sales leader, and we traveled into the field probably once a month with my team. So it was like a it was like a SMB to mid-market sale, that my team was doing. I thought about, look, if I want to be an AVP, right? Someone who's running a region or running a regional office, what are the skills I'm going to need? Like, okay, well, I've got an okay amount, again, of leading this type of person, like this. Yeah. So I'm going to need to get experience, and that was really kind of the flex point I had, that there was a step above that was in between from a leadership standpoint, but my team was already getting promoted into that group. During that 2-year period, I had more people promoted my team, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of reps across the company than any other team. So it's like, okay, what am I going to learn there? It's like, are the reps that different? Is the deal size that different? I'm like, no, it's not. It's like very small. Enterprise sales, though, I knew was a bigger gap. So I knew if I had this leadership, then I had done this, then that's probably going to put me in the best position to be an AVP or a regional leader. And so that would be my advice, is just think about the next step. If you have the foresight to know exactly what it is you want to be in 10 years, then fantastic. Then reverse engineer it. Okay, great. So where do you need to be, in 8 years? Then where do you need to be in 6 years? Where do you need to be in 4 years? Where do you need to be in 2 years? So it's all about reverse engineering your skills and reverse engineering the path there. And then you start to play with it. You say, okay, well, that's my 10-year plan. How can I get there in 6? Well, I guess if I did this right now, and then I did this right now, as opposed to too many people, that goes back to it. If you're always just looking at the extra 5, 10, 20K, you're not thinking about your career like this, man. You're thinking about your career as just like, you think you're going to get picked like some special flower if you just do really well. Like, oh, well, look at Johnny. Johnny's doing so well. We're going to magically promote him. That is just not how it works. You got to go get yours. You got to go make it happen. And if people help you and companies help you along the way, like I said, Career Builder, for me early in my career, they put me through leadership training. They put me through executive leadership training. They paid for my MBA. So I found a company, but I took every advantage of it. I pushed for those opportunities. I didn't sit back and wait for them. I didn't say, I wonder if I can get picked for this. I was like, no, look, I know about this program. I want to be a part of it. What do you need to see from me over the next 6 months to make it happen? And I think too many people are passive in their career development, or expect their boss or somebody else to do it for them. And that's just not how it works. You have to own your career development and hope that you'll find some people along the way that are going to help you to get there, but you can't rely on that solely.
And that brings me to a thing that you wrote about 6 months ago. That is, I'm bringing you into what I call the selfish section of the interview, where I ask something that's very selfish for me personally. And so I started a new role this week. And one of the posts that really stuck out to me from yours was talking about some of the things that you would do if you started at a new company, at a new job, that were a little polarizing. Some people might love it. Some people might hate it. Could you
Sure.
elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I love that you brought that one up. That was because it is exactly what I would do. It's not bullshit. It's what I would do. Look, I realized very early in my career. I'll tell you what it was. I had a guy when I was in Tampa. This guy Brian Ross, and Brian's now. I think Brian's the head of sales at maybe for the Pelicans. I can't remember where Brian's at. Shout out Brian Ross. What's up, bud? But Brian was older than me. Brian was probably 5 or 6 years older than me. So he had switched. He had been in banking and he had a passion for sports and wanted to get into sports. So he had switched. And so Brian turned me back on to reading and turned me back on. I used to like to read, when I was growing up. I liked to read a little bit, and not so much in college, but I did enjoy it. So Brian, would suggest books and I would read. And what I realized through this is like, man, I'm just going to rip all this stuff off. Like all these best practices in these books, I'm just going to do it. Like these people wrote books, like they're doing well. Like I'm just going to literally repeat what they say to say to people. And, and then I'd listen to the other reps that had been there for a while. Like, oh, that's smart. I'm just going to steal that too. And so if I started a new job, and then so I go back to, then again, I get my next job. What do I do again? I go listen to what the top reps are saying, who are the top performers, and I go rip off and say exactly what they said. And then I go make it my own. And I think I learned very early on that when you start a new job, the point I made is like, I would now, I think I would do this. I would go now to the very top or top 2 salespeople, said, look, I'm going to give you 10% of my commission if you spend an extra 2 hour or an hour with me every week. Why? Because you're not competing against that. That is this bullshit in sales cultures. You're not competing against each other. You're competing against yourself. So therefore, go beg, borrow, and steal the best practices from everybody. Same thing with sales tech. I don't know if you remember, it was that post or a different one. I said, look, oh my God, I wish half these tools existed when I was a seller. I would have no problem, zero, spending $200 to $300 a month on my own sales tech stack. Why? I know it's going to make me better. And I don't need a boss to tell me that. I don't need a sales ops team. If this thing can help me to
stack,
dude, Outreach, Gong, and Sales Nav, I would pay for out of my own pocket immediately, right? Outreach. Why? The volume of quality interactions that I could do, because I can just triage more people, not to hit send all. That's not why, but I can just have so many different people in different parts. Sales Navigator. So again, I can build lists. I can do commenting, liking, a lot of those things. And then Gong, so I could listen to my own game tape and get better. So that would be some of like the core ones that I would have, but I have no problem paying that $300 a month. And again, a lot of people are like, why would you work for a company that would make you pay? I'm like, look, the company's job is not to give you everything. Like I'm doing this because I think that $300 a month investment is going to turn into $3,000. Right. So that's on me. I am making this choice. I think this $1,000 a month investment in this rep to teach me everything they know and sit in on my calls and have invested, I think that's going to make me $4,000 a month. So I think for me, I always just think about, this is about you getting better. I mean, that's kind of a theme we've been talking about this morning, is like, this is all about me being the best version of me. And if my company is going to pay for it, amazing. Thank you. Love you. I'm going to try to convince my boss to pay for it. But if not, I've got no problem doing it. I seriously, and I don't understand the mindset of people that would not want that. They wouldn't want someone to be more vested in them. They wouldn't want to have a best in class tech stack on their own. So that's my take on it, man.
Yeah. And it's the same thing as signing up for, a sales training online. It's reading sales books or podcasts or whatever. It's finding a dollar amount that, again, according to whatever your circumstances are, that you can invest to help make yourself better and then make more money in the long run. So
yeah, exactly.
So I'm definitely with that. Before we let you wrap up, I appreciate a lot of the content that you put out. You seem to follow a very Gary V-esque model where you're all over Instagram, which is I think pretty rare in the sales community. Yeah. LinkedIn, YouTube, you're hitting it hard and heavy. So one, where is the best place for people to find you and connect with you? And two, what's top of mind? What's something that you're excited about right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, for all of your sellers, I think, look, man, this goes back to guys like, look, I think I've put up now almost 300 plus videos on YouTube, at least. And we haven't even really been focused there. So that's like the next news. So what I'm really excited about for me and what I'm focused on is I'm going to be doing like a dedicated YouTube show talking about scaling some of the things we're talking about, scaling business, scaling your career, things like that. But go check out my YouTube. And again, go rip off everything I talk about. Guys, I am telling you, look, I'm not, and I'll tell you this, I had a boss that taught me this. I was 26, going on 27. I was at Career Builder. I was the second to last person. I hadn't sold anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm God's gift. Why haven't I sold anything? And he goes, Jake, drink the Kool-Aid. He goes, just do. It goes back to what I'm telling you guys. Like, this is a reoccurring theme in my life where people would just tell me, dude, just sell out. Just like, and he goes to me, he goes, Jake, I listened to your call. Do you think we train 1,000 people on this because it doesn't work? Do you think the sales process, do you think we're stupid? And I was like, no. He's like, then just read the script, read the messaging. I closed $60,000 in new business the next month. 60.
Wow.
And so go watch the YouTube stuff and just rip it off. Just do verbatim. Like, I literally give a lot of tactical scripting too, not just like theory. So I would go check out YouTube if you just want like some tips to like up your game. LinkedIn, obviously, look, every day I'm posting on LinkedIn once, if not twice a day. So definitely find me on LinkedIn. Instagram, if you like smoke meats and behind the scenes stuff, I share more of like that. I do a daily sales tips on my Instagram stories, where I just like something like in this conversation, I'll be like, hey, here's something very tactical. So trying to do something a little bit different on each platform, but LinkedIn is kind of home base. And I think for all of you out there in sales, the number one advice that I can give you is build a digital presence. And what I mean by that is, guys, I'm not doing this. I am doing this because this is where my audience lives, right? A lot of these people are on LinkedIn. CEOs, VPs of sales, our clients, my clients are on LinkedIn. And so I'm communicating, building a reputation. You have an online reputation, whether you want to or not. I can Google your name. And I'm telling you, as it gets more and more difficult to cut through the noise, as email gets more inundated, as phone and all these channels, having a reputation is going to help you to cut. We've closed millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in business from organic. We've closed big 6-figure deals with people where the conversation is, Jake, I don't even know what you do. I don't even, by the way, for everyone, I run a sales consulting company. And so they're like, I don't even know what you do, but I get the gist of it. Like, can we set up a meeting? And, we've closed, $80,000 deals in 2 days. Like, so building a reputation, it's going to help you cut through the noise. It's going to help to accelerate deal cycles, establish you in your own space. Don't worry about if you sell into HR, be the best person you can be for HR leaders. If you sell into finance, be the best person you can for CFOs or for people in banking. I think, look, for me, I talk so much about sales because that's my audience. That's what I do. But if I sold into, for some reason, aerospace engineers, I would never talk about sales on LinkedIn. I would only talk about the future of aerospace engineering. And so I think too many people focus on the reputation that you want to build because it will pay off big time. And that's why we're doing it. Why do you think we're investing in this organic social media, right? We're investing because, it's about building reputation. And once you have that, that is something that stays with you for a long time. So start today. Don't worry about being too young. Just share things you learn. Share things like you started a podcast, right? Think about what are the things that reshare conversations you have with executives. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but now would be the time I would double down on this if I were you.
And even that too, not only just for selling better, but for future job opportunities too. It stands out as part of as someone that has just gone through the interview process for the last few months. It's definitely something that stands out and is a conversation piece and just helps people get to know you better.
I bet, man. Yeah. How easy was it? How much did it help you to open doors?
It helped a ton. Part of it, just seeing that and being able to talk about that, I think has helped to just, legitimize a younger person, but also even more importantly, I think it's just been the connections. I meet people like you that then, if there's an opportunity down the line, either it's with you or it's with someone, and that's been super helpful.
That's exactly right, man. That's exactly it.
So I appreciate you, Jake. I'm not
awesome,
BSing you. You have some of the best content out there. So everyone check him out on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you prefer to ingest some of your content and give it a listen. But Jake, I appreciate the time this morning, man.
Awesome, man. Thank you. I enjoyed it. Take care, everyone.